The sun hung low over the dusty Nevada range, casting long shadows across the cracked earth where U.S. Marines stood in a loose semicircle, their laughter cutting through the dry air like gunfire. In the center of their jeers stood Specialist Sarah Kane, her petite frame dwarfed by the hulking figures in camouflage. Clutched in her hands was a rifle painted a shocking bubblegum pink, glinting absurdly under the desert sun. The Marines, hardened men with scars and stories etched into their faces, couldn't hold back their chuckles. "What's that, Barbie's sniper kit?" one bellowed, slapping his knee. Another leaned in, smirking. "Hope you brought your glitter ammo, sweetheart." Sarah's jaw tightened, but her hazel eyes burned with a quiet fire. She didn't flinch, didn't snap back. She just stood there, gripping her pink rifle, letting their laughter wash over her like a wave she'd learned to weather long ago. This is the story of how a 6,000-meter shot silenced an entire range and turned their mockery into awe. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and you will join thousands who love stories of grit and triumph. Let's dive in. Sarah Kane wasn't supposed to be here. Growing up in a small Ohio town, she was the girl who'd rather sketch wildflowers than play sports. The one who'd sneak into her dad's garage to tinker with his old hunting rifles instead of going to prom. Her father, a Vietnam vet with a limp and a chest full of medals, taught her to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold a barrel steady. "It's not about strength," he'd say, tapping her temple. "It's about focus. See the target before you even pull the trigger." By 16, Sarah could hit a soda can at 500 yards with her dad's beat-up .308. But the pink rifle, that was her rebellion. Tired of blending into the gray and green world of her father's guns, she painted her first custom-build a color that screamed defiance. It was her way of saying she didn't need to fit in to stand out. When she enlisted in the Marines at 22, that rifle came with her, a neon middle finger to anyone who doubted her. Basic training was brutal. Sarah wasn't the fastest or the strongest, and the other recruits are mostly mean and never let her forget it. They'd trip her during runs, accidentally knock her gear into the mud, and whisper behind her back about the girly gun she cleaned with meticulous care. Her drill sergeant, a grizzled bear of a man named Gunnery Sergeant Holt, didn't cut her any slack either. "Kane, you shoot as weak as that pink paint job, you're out," he'd bark, his voice like gravel. But Sarah wasn't weak. She'd spend nights studying ballistics, memorizing wind charts, and practicing her breathing until her lungs felt like they could hold a storm. She graduated in the top 10% of her class, earning her spot in the Marine Corps Elite Sniper program. Still, the pink rifle made her a target. To her peers, it was a joke. To her, it was a promise. Fast forward to that Nevada morning in 2025. A blistering day at the Corps' most grueling sniper qualification range. The event was a rare open challenge, where the best marksmen from across the branches gathered to test their skills on targets so distant they were barely specks on the horizon. The range was a beast, 6,000 meters of unpredictable wind, heat mirages warping the air, and terrain that seemed to shift with every gust. Only a handful of snipers in history had ever hit a target at that distance, and the Marines around Sarah were the best of the best, men who'd trained for years, men who'd seen combat in places she'd only read about. They carried custom rifles with scopes that cost more than her car, their gear polished to perfection. Sarah's pink rifle, with its scuffed paint and well-worn grip, looked like a toy in comparison. The laughter started the moment she stepped onto the range. "Nice nail polish, Kane," shouted Corporal Davis, a barrel-chested Marine with a reputation for never missing. The others joined in, their voices overlapping in a chorus of taunts. "You gonna shoot that thing or just pose for Instagram? Bet she's got a matching pink bullet." Sarah ignored them, her focus locked on the range. She knelt, unzipped her gear bag, and pulled out a single round a custom 50 BMG cartridge she'd spent months perfecting with her dad's old reloading press. The Marines didn't know it, but that pink rifle wasn't just a statement. It was a precision-engineered masterpiece, built from the ground up to her exact specifications. Every screw, every spring, every curve of the barrel was hers. She'd poured her soul into it, and today, she'd make them see. The range officer, a stoic captain named Rivera, called the shooters to their positions. The rules were simple: one shot each at progressively farther targets, starting at 1,000 meters and ending at the impossible 6,000 meter mark. Miss once, and you're out. The crowd of onlooker submarines, instructors, even a few brass from the Pentagon watched with folded arms, their murmurs a low hum of anticipation. Sarah was the only woman on the line, and the weight of their stares felt heavier than her rifle. The first rounds cracked through the air, each shooter taking their shot at the 1,000 meter target. One by one, they hit their marks, the steel plates ringing faintly in the distance. Sarah's turn came. She lay prone, her cheek pressed against the stock, her breath slow and steady. The pink rifle gleamed. She squeezed the trigger. The plate sang. The crowd nodded, unimpressed. Beginner's luck, Davis muttered, loud enough for her to hear. The targets got harder. At 2,000 meters, 2 shooters missed, their shots kicking up dust just shy of the mark. They slunk off the line, heads down. At 3,000 meters, another 3 were eliminated, their scopes unable to compensate for the swirling desert wind. Sarah kept firing, her shots landing with the precision that started to draw whispers. By 4,000 meters, only a dozen shooters remained, including Davis, who still smirked every time Sarah took her position. "Keep up, princess," he called as she nailed the 4,500 meter target. The crowd was quieter now, the laughter fading into something else, a curiosity, maybe even respect. But Sarah didn't care about their approval. She was here for one shot, the one nobody thought she could make. At 5,000 meters, the range felt like another planet. The target was a speck, invisible without the scope, distorted by waves of heat rising off the sand. Only 5 shooters were left: Davis, 2 other Marines, an Army Ranger, and Sarah. The wind was a living thing now, shifting direction every few seconds, mocking their calculations. Davis went first, his shot landing close but not close enough. He cursed, slamming his fist into the dirt. The Ranger missed next, his bullet vanishing into the haze. The other 2 Marines followed, their shots falling short. Sarah was last. She adjusted her scope, her fingers steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. The crowd was silent now, the air thick with tension. She exhaled, her world narrowing to the crosshairs. The trigger felt like an extension of her heartbeat. She fired. The shot echoed like thunder, rolling across the range and fading into the distance. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint ping rang out, the unmistakable sound of steel struck at 5,000 meters. The crowd erupted, not in cheers but in stunned gasps. Rivera, the range officer, checked his spotting scope and shook his head in disbelief. "Hit confirmed," he said, his voice flat but his eyes wide. Davis stared at Sarah, his smirk gone, replaced by something unreadable. The other shooters exchanged glances. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. But she wasn't done. The 6,000 meter target was a myth. A challenge so absurd it was almost ceremonial. No one expected a hit. The world record for a confirmed sniper shot was just shy of 3,500 meters, and even that was a miracle. At 6,000, the bullet would have to travel for nearly 10 seconds, battling gravity, wind, and the curvature of the Earth itself. The remaining shooters took their turns, each one missing by a mile. Davis was last before Sarah, his face set in grim determination. He fired, and the crowd waited, squinting into the distance. Nothing. He stepped back, shaking his head, muttering about the wind. Sarah was the only one left. She lay down again, the pink rifle steady in her hands. The crowd was a wall of silence now, every eye on her. Rivera's voice crackled over the radio. "Kane, you're up. 1 shot. Make it count." She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge him. Her world was the scope, the target a faint blur against the horizon. She'd run the calculations 100 times in her head, adjusting for wind speed, temperature, even the Coriolis effect. Her dad's voice echoed in her mind. "See the target before you pull the trigger." She saw it now, not just the steel plate but the moment of the chance to rewrite what everyone thought of her. The Marines who'd laughed, the instructors who doubted, the world that had tried to box her in. This was her shot. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle roared, the recoil slamming into her shoulder like a freight train. The bullet soared, a tiny speck of metal hurtling through 6 kilometers of chaos. Time stretched. the crowd holding its breath as the seconds ticked by. 1, 2, 3. At 8 seconds, Sarah's heart stopped. At 9, a sound split the silence via a sharp, impossible ping that echoed like a bell across the range. The crowd froze. Rivera stared through his scope, his jaw dropping. "Hit a broken bar," confirmed. He stammered, his voice barely audible. The range exploded into chaos. Marines shouting, clapping, some just standing there, mouths open. Davis turned away, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his face a mask of defeat. Sarah stood, her pink rifle resting against her hip. She didn't cheer, didn't gloat. She just looked out at the horizon, where her bullet had done the impossible. The crowd surged around her, but she felt alone in the best way, like she'd finally proven something to herself. Rivera approached, his usual stoicism cracked by a rare grin. "Kane, that was one hell of a shot. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" She thought of her dad, his calloused hands guiding hers, his voice steady even when the world wasn't home. She said simply. Word of Sarah's shot spread like wildfire. By the next morning, her name was trending on X, clips of the 6,000-meter hit tracking up millions of views. The pink rifle became an icon, a symbol of defiance and precision that inspired a generation. Sarah didn't care about the fame. She went back to her unit, back to her training, back to the rifle that had always been her truth. But something had changed. The Marines who'd laughed now nodded when she passed. Davis, humbled, offered her a quiet good shot one day in the mess hall. She nodded back. No words needed. That Nevada day wasn't just about a bullet hitting a target. It was about a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else's rules, who took every taunt, every doubt, and turned it into fuel. Sarah Kane and her pink rifle rewrote the story of what a Marine could be, one impossible shot at a time. Hey, thanks for watching this story of grit and glory. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know, from which part of the country are you watching this video? Your response keeps this channel alive, so let's get those comments rolling.